Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. Few figures in the history of psychology have had as profound and lasting an impact on our understanding of childhood and learning as Jean Piaget, a Swiss developmental psychologist. Piaget didn't just study children. He sought to crack the code of human intelligence, viewing the child not as a miniature adult lacking knowledge, but as an active, pint-sized scientist engaged in constructing their own world. His cognitive development theory, a groundbreaking body of work spanning over 5 decades, posits that children move through 4 distinct, universal stages, each characterized by a fundamentally different way of thinking and reasoning. This wasn't just a psychological finding. It was a paradigm shift that completely changed the educational landscape, setting the stage for what we now recognize as modern, child-centered pedagogy. Before Piaget came along, the prevailing thought, largely driven by behaviorism, often treated the child's mind as a blank slate, a tabula rasa, waiting to be filled with information. Piaget flipped the script. He proposed that development precedes learning, meaning a child's readiness to grasp certain concepts is entirely dependent on their current developmental stage. This idea was, and remains, a game-changer for educators. It means that teaching a 6th grade algebra concept to a kindergartner isn't just inefficient. It's developmentally inappropriate, like pouring water into a strainer. The theoretical framework he built, a robust structure encompassing schemas, assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration, provides the bedrock for a constructivist approach to education, insisting that the best way to learn is by doing. We will delve into the heart of Piaget's theory, dissecting his core concepts and meticulously detailing the 4 cognitive stages. More importantly, we will examine the profound and enduring educational implications of his work, illustrating how Piagetian principles are not just historical footnotes, but rather living, breathing guides for effective teaching practices that continue to resonate in contemporary American classrooms. Core concepts of Piagetian theory. To truly appreciate the educational application of Piaget's work, we must first get a handle on the essential terminology he introduced. These concepts function as the intellectual tools children use to organize and make sense of the world, driving the entire developmental process forward. Schemas, the building blocks of knowledge. At the very top of the list are schemas, sometimes called schemata. Think of schemas as mental blueprints or organized packages of information. They are the basic units of knowledge we use to interpret and respond to the world. A baby might have a simple sucking schema to understand how to interact with a bottle or a thumb. A toddler might develop a dog schema that includes 4 legs, fur, and a bark. As a child matures, these schemas don't just accumulate, they become more complex, organized, and interconnected, allowing for increasingly sophisticated thought. For an educator, recognizing a student's existing schemas, or lack thereof, is crucial, as it tells them exactly where to pitch a new lesson. Adaptation, assimilation, and accommodation. The process by which children continually adjust their thinking to new information is called adaptation. This mechanism has 2 complementary parts that go hand in hand: assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is like fitting new information into an existing schema. If the toddler with the dog schema sees a new type of dog, say a long-haired dachshund instead of a short-haired terrier, they simply assimilate the new creature into their established dog schema. The existing structure holds up. They just broaden its application. Accommodation, on the other hand, is required when the new information simply doesn't fit. Imagine that same toddler then sees a cat. The cat has 4 legs and fur, which might lead the child to initially assimilate it into the dog schema and call it doggy. However, the cat doesn't bark, and it acts differently. The resulting cognitive conflict forces the toddler to accommodate, that is, to modify, refine, or create a brand new schema. They must now create a new, separate cat schema. Accommodation is the engine of intellectual growth because it requires the genuine transformation of thought. Equilibration, the drive for balance. The dynamic tension between assimilation and accommodation is managed by the powerful, inherent drive toward equilibration. This is essentially a child's innate desire for cognitive balance. When a child encounters something new and it fits perfectly, assimilation, they are in a state of equilibrium. When they encounter something that doesn't fit, the cat, they fall into a state of disequilibrium or cognitive conflict. This uncomfortable state is the motivational fuel that pushes them to seek equilibrium again through accommodation, by changing their mind or creating a new schema. From an educational standpoint, this is arguably the most vital concept. A skilled teacher doesn't just present facts, they strategically create optimal disequilibrium. They challenge students just enough to make them slightly uncomfortable, forcing them to genuinely rethink and reconstruct their knowledge without pushing them so far into confusion that they simply give up. This concept is central to effective instructional design. The 4 stages of cognitive development, a ladder of thinking. Piaget determined that a child's progression through the 4 stages is invariant, meaning all children go through them in the same order and universal. Crucially, the stages are qualitative, not quantitative. It's not just that children know more at age 7 and at age 2, but that they think in a completely different way. 1. The sensory motor stage, birth to 2 years. This stage is all about action and senses. Babies, as the name suggests, learn about the world through their senses and motor activities: seeing, touching, tasting, grasping, and moving. Cognition is literally tied to physical interaction. Key achievements: circular reactions, repetitive actions, sucking on a toy, dropping a spoon, that help them figure out cause and effect. Object permanence, the crowning achievement of this stage. It's the realization that objects continue to exist even when they are out of sight. Before 8 months, out of sight, out of mind, is literally true for an infant. The development of object permanence, usually solidified by 18 to 24 months, is a huge cognitive leap that indicates the beginning of mental representation. Educational implications, early childhood education. While this stage is primarily handled by parents and caregivers, it lays the groundwork for all future learning. Programs for this age group should prioritize sensory stimulation and active exploration. Toys should be safe and varied in texture, sound, and color. Caregivers need to engage in games like peekaboo, which helps reinforce the concept of object permanence. At the end of the day, an environment rich in doing is the only thing that works here. The focus is on physical manipulation to build those foundational sensoromotor schemas. 2. The preoperational stage, 2 to 7 years. Once a child achieves object permanence, they transition to the preoperational stage. The biggest shift here is the development of the symbolic function, the ability to use symbols, words, drawings, gestures to represent objects and ideas. This is why a broom can suddenly become a horse, or a banana can become a telephone. Language acquisition takes off during this time. Cognitive limitations. Despite this exciting new ability, the preoperational child's thinking is rife with limitations that often lead them astray. Egocentrism. This is the most famous limitation. It's not selfishness, but the cognitive inability to take another person's perspective. The child truly believes that everyone sees, feels, and thinks exactly as they do. Piaget famously demonstrated this with the 3 mountains task. Centration, the tendency to focus on only one salient aspect, center, of the situation and ignore all others. Irreversibility, the inability to mentally reverse a sequence of events or actions. Lack of conservation. This limitation is the most defining characteristic of the stage. The preoperational child cannot understand that the quantity of something remains the same, is conserved, even if its appearance changes. This is perfectly illustrated in the classic conservation tasks. The conservation task example. A researcher shows a child 2 identical glasses of water, glass A and glass B. The child agrees they have the same amount. The water from glass B is then poured into a tall, thin glass C. Because the water level is now higher in glass C, the child will center on the height and conclude that glass C now has more water, failing to realize the operation could be reversed and the quantity conserved. Educational implications. Preschool and early elementary. Teaching here must revolve around play and hands-on activities, as these allow children to use symbols and physically explore concepts. Concrete materials. Forget abstract concepts. Use blocks, sand, water, and colored beads to teach counting, size, and classification. Role-playing and imaginative play. Encourage pretend play to help children start to decenter their thinking and gradually step into other roles. Language richness. Capitalize on the explosion of language by providing rich vocabulary and opportunities for conversation, which is critical for moving beyond egocentric thought. The focus is on doing the mathematics or being the historical figure, not just reading about it. 3. The concrete operational stage, 7 to 11 years. Around age 7, the child hits a turning point, moving into the concrete operational stage. They have finally figured out how to use mental operations, which are logical rules applied to problems. The most important change is that they have mastered the concept of conservation. Their thinking is now logical, but with a major catch. It must be applied to concrete objects and events. They can't yet think logically about purely hypothetical or abstract concepts. Key achievements. Mental operations. Conservation. They now understand that quantity, mass, and volume remain the same despite changes in appearance. Decentration and reversibility. They can focus on multiple aspects of a problem, decentration, and mentally reverse the steps, reversibility, which underpins conservation. Seriation. The ability to mentally arrange items along a quantifiable dimension, such as height or weight. Example, lining up 10 sticks from shortest to longest. Transitivity. The ability to logically combine relationships to understand a third relationship, e.g., if A greater than B and B greater than C, then A greater than C. Educational implications. Elementary school. This stage is the sweet spot for elementary education. The classroom needs to facilitate logical reasoning applied to the physical world. Hands-on learning is non-negotiable. Students need to solve problems using physical materials, manipulatives. Teaching fractions is best done by cutting up actual pies or pizzas, not just by drawing circles on a whiteboard. Inductive reasoning. The concrete thinker works best by starting with specific examples and working toward a general principle, inductive logic. A science lesson might involve observing specific types of rocks, examples, before defining the general classification system, principle. Avoid abstraction. Concepts like complex algebraic variables or deep philosophical debates are still likely over their head. Teachers should stick to tangible examples and real-world scenarios to ground their lessons. 4. The formal operational stage, 11 years and up. The final and most advanced stage begins around adolescence. The key feature here is the transition from thinking about the concrete to thinking about the abstract. The adolescent can now manipulate ideas and concepts in their mind without needing to reference the physical world. Their cognitive structures are now fully formed and capable of adult thought. Key achievements. Abstract thought. They can handle concepts that have no physical reality, such as justice, freedom, morality, and complex mathematical formulas like E=mc². Hypothetical deductive reasoning. This is the systematic scientific approach to problem solving. When faced with a problem, the adolescent can generate a hypothesis, deduce what should happen if that hypothesis is correct, and systematically test those possibilities one by one. This is thinking like a scientist. Propositional thought, the ability to evaluate the logic of verbal statements, propositions, without needing to refer to real-world examples. They can follow the logic of an argument, even if the premises are factually false. Debate and discussion. Encourage debates on philosophical, ethical, and political issues, forcing students to consider multiple, abstract viewpoints and use logical argumentation. Scientific method and experimental design. Students can be taught to design experiments, control variables, and use hypothetical reasoning to predict outcomes. Educational implications, middle school, high school, and beyond. The formal operational stage is where traditional secondary and higher education really hits its stride. Instruction can now shift dramatically toward abstract concepts and critical thinking. Metacognition. Adolescents can now think about their own thinking, metacognition. Teachers can foster this by asking students to reflect on their learning process, evaluate their own problem-solving strategies, and explain why they chose a particular solution. The focus moves from what is the answer to how did you figure out the answer.